Alright, g'day, hi and welcome. Okay, I'm going to have one of those long form discussion videos again. Just figured it was something that I never really hear anybody talk about. And obviously this is going to have to do with guitars. Now, pretty much every guitar, well, actually every guitar in this video is a guitar that I've previously owned. With the exception of maybe the one coming up, not this one, but the next one. There might be one or two guitars that I was just playing at like jam nights and stuff like that of other people, like this tack that's coming up. And I thought that it'd be interesting to talk about why you shouldn't buy too many cheap guitars. And like this, for example, this tack that's not mine, but that's like it was a very expensive guitar. It was a very nice playing guitar. I know where it is. The guy would probably sell it to me if I had the money. Uh, but anyway, over the years, I've had lots of really good guitars and lots of really cheap guitars. And one thing I notice is that when you buy a good guitar, doesn't matter what the guitar is, whatever your special guitar is going to be, the one thing that you do notice is that you get to a point where it's just like you don't play the cheap guitars anymore. And that pretty much sums up pretty much what I'm going to be getting at in this video of how you can waste a lot of money saying that guitar is too expensive, I'm not going to buy it because it's just too expensive. And then you buy 5 cheap guitars that cost more than the one really good guitar. I mean, sure, you'll have 5 guitars, but you have 5 guitars that you're never fully happy with. Now, one of the things I'll say is that how I noticed this for myself was just playing live and stuff like that. Back in the 90s, dating myself here, I played probably over 200 and some odd shows, 200, probably closer to 300 shows. We'd play like 4 nights a week. So I used a lot of guitars on stage over the years, and everything breaks. There is no guitar that just never breaks down. There's always something that happens. Uh, a recent guitar that I actually got, my 12 string, like the bridge just went out on it the other day. Yeah, as soon as I decided to record. This guitar here was my first good guitar, and like high-end guitar, and it got stolen on me. I'm still bitter about that. I was back in 1980, 87, 88 maybe. I bought that guitar. It was an Ibanez RG750. This is my first electric guitar and amp in that picture. And that was a cool guitar. It was a 1968 Harmony Rocket. And I got that guitar and amp for $250 or $350. I can't remember. I want to say 250. And I bought it off a cousin, technically cousin, whatever. And I had bought it because I wanted an electric guitar, and it was when I was 10 years old, I really started taking to the guitar. But I had started playing guitar, technically, you could say, when I was 5 and self-taught and everything. So you can imagine how much noise and racket I made, right? And I knew I wanted an electric guitar, but I just couldn't afford one. But I was lucky enough to save up enough money working, after school, and if on the weekends I'd have I worked like 1 day a week, at this landfill site. We used to call it a dump, and just basically I was there to make sure that the bush didn't catch on fire. This is my second guitar, and this was a lot better suited for what I was going to do. And that one was a $150 guitar, brand new from International Continental Music on Montreal Road when they were there. Uh, and that guitar served me fairly well. It was the right style of guitar I wanted. I either wanted a Flying V or I wanted the Explorer because I was a big Scorpions fan at the time. I was also a big AC/DC fan. Now, here's the thing. The Harmony Rocket, the problem with it was it wasn't the right tool to the job. It was a great sounding guitar. Actually, in hindsight, I probably should have kept it because it was a really nice sounding birch body guitar. It had a really thin neck, like a Rickenbacker. Definitely wasn't really meant for hard rock heavy metal. You couldn't put any volume to this thing without it just squealing like a banshee. It was quite horrendous. It drove everybody nuts. But I liked it because I had a lot of fun with it. It's just you had to play it all the time. You couldn't let up off the strings at all at any distortion or volume because it would just feed back on you so bad. You know what I mean? But on the clean sound, it was pretty dynamic sounding. It was like having 3 P90s in it. It was a good sounding guitar. It wasn't what I was looking for. And So when I decided to upgrade, the next guitar, like I say, was that $150 guitar. So I'm now a couple of years into playing, and I'm like 13 years old or whatever when I got my first electric guitar, and that was cool and dandy. And then about a year after, it was my mom and dad bought me that little TCM Explorer, and it was like 150 bucks, I guess, plus tax or whatever. And that guitar was a solid body, it was a plywood body guitar. It played actually quite well for what it was. I was able to get the action low enough that it was playable. Uh, Not the greatest sounding, a very muddy sounding guitar as you imagine a plywood body guitar would be, but it looked really cool, and you could put the volume to it with without it being not too bad. But it had basically like kind of like a Fender Strat tremolo where there was not locking or like that, so the thing wouldn't stay in tune very well. Uh, what I ended up doing was I ended up putting a block and jamming the floating bridge just so it would stay in tune better. Used it like a fixed bridge, but it was cool to do dive bombs and stuff like that. But every time you did a dive bomb on it, that was it. This guitar I picked up not too long ago. It's a relatively inexpensive guitar. It's like a $400 guitar. I bought that in 2015, I think. Now, this is a good guitar, though. This guitar was bought in mind with a good playing. Obviously, I love Flying V's. I always did, always will. Their Flying V's are awesome. But this would be like, let's say you were just beginning to play guitar. This would be more guitar than you could probably handle in the beginning. That said, if you were an experienced guitar player or a gigging guitar player and you didn't want to beat up your good instruments, this is the type of guitar for you. So it makes sense to buy a lower cost guitar like this and beat it up, because when we get into some of the guitars, there's going to be a Green Hammer Diablo coming up in the pictures at some point, and I think it's the guitar I regret getting rid of the most. And I'll get into why that guitar was so great and why when I bought that guitar it was kind of like, if I was ever going to have a signature model guitar, that would probably be it. The more I think about this guitar all the time, it served me so well, but I got rid of it when it had problems. The neck got warped and all. That's why I bought the Flying V, so that I would never have a kind of a dream guitar get worn out like that. Again, you play 200 and some odd shows with any guitar. I don't care what guitar it is. It's not going to make it from the first show to the last show without any incidents, playing, especially the places we would play. Now, this is back when, not only were you in bars that were hot and, with the spotlights and everything on you, like really close to the stage, because the stages weren't that big, and they, for some reason, they always figured that the lights had to be right on top of the stage, like right at the very front of the stage, where, I mean, they didn't melt you. They could have put them on the wall like 30 feet back just so it wouldn't be so hot, but that stuff beats up your instruments like big time. You want to ruin a guitar, take it on the road. And I mean, I never went on the road. I was just like, playing the cities and, the countrysides a little bit, like not really, it was just, we were playing 4 nights a week sometimes. So I'll get into the Gibsons in a little bit. Basically, there's two. There's an Sg61 Reissue, which is my second most expensive guitar, second most expensive guitar I've ever bought. The SG3 is the most expensive. The SG3 was brand spanking new. This is my $6 guitar. I got rid of it. And the reason why it was $6 is because I found it in the garbage, fixed it up, and the strings were $6. But that guitar served me well until I got rid of it. I kind of regret getting rid of it. You had to tune it with a pair of pliers, but it held tuning just fine. It was an interesting guitar. But this SG3 here was about it was $1,560 plus tax, so you're looking at probably, it was around $1,700-1,800, and then plus I bought it on the credit card, so I probably paid about $2,300 with the interest and everything on it by the time I paid it off. And I bought it on the credit card, and after I bought that, the reason why I bought that before the SG61 was because it was a little bit cheaper, and it was like basically the poor man's SG Custom, meaning you got everything you could do with an SG Custom on the SG3s. Now, mind you, I modded mine. I've modded this a little bit to make it a little bit more user-friendly, but it was, about half the price. Like an SG Custom, and the thing, I mean, this thing just looks, the pictures do not do this guitar justice, and the playability of this guitar is phenomenal. It's also turning out to be a really good recording guitar too. Great sound, mahogany body, rosewood fingerboard, 23 24 and 3/4 scale length, one classic 57 plus and two classic 57s in it. Quite a few combinations the way I've got it. I think that's, yeah, it's in the original state there with the, it had 5-way switching on it with that chicken head knob, but it wasn't very practical for live playing. So I popped out the chicken head knob and put in a 3-way toggle, wired the normal 2 pickups, the bridge and the neck normal, and then I wired it pretty much to the output jack, and then, or to the push, and then the push pull pot, which is the volume. I bypass the tone. The push pull pot basically turns on or turns off. If you pull it up, it turns it on the middle pickup. You push it in, it turns it off. So basically, you can get quite a bit of sounds out of that. You can get about 6 different sounds out of this guitar. And if I get really crazy with wiring it up again, I could probably get about 30 or 60 sounds out of this guitar if I really, really wanted to. There might be some pictures in here of me on the stage with a violin. There's my old violin. And it just, you know, I just took everything out of my guitars folder and instrument folder. And that's why they're in there. So anyway, let's go back to my second guitar. Okay, so now let's add this up. My first guitar with the amp, that 50-watt trainer amp, I don't know what year it was an old one when I got it, and that 1968 Harmony Rocket, $250. Okay, for somebody just beginning, that's a perfect price range. Even if you buy it for your kid and he plays it 2 times and he never looks at it again, it's $250, right? Like, I mean, you're going to recover from it. You'll be pissed, but you'll be recovering from it. It's not thousands of dollars. Now let's add the $250 plus, you guessed it, the other $150. Now we're at $400. Hey, wait a minute! I could have bought the Flying V for that price. You see where I'm going with this? Like, you know, like, but the Flying V would have been too expensive. You know what I mean? Now, what I say is buy your first guitar. Okay, if you're just a beginner, just buy your first guitar for as cheap as possible. And I wanted to make this all about beginners, because the beginner phase, there's a million videos on how to buy a good guitar for your first guitar and stuff like that, and I've already covered videos on that. But what I would say is, for your second guitar, don't skimp. Save up for your dream guitar. Maybe you can't save up for your dream guitar, but there are a lot of great guitars out there for like well under $1,000. Like, I mean, if you like Paul Reed Smith's, those SE models, I've played them in the stores and stuff like that. I've never owned one, but I'm like, used, there are a lot of, that's a big bang for the buck. I mean, they seem to be a really good deal, because they seem to go for well under $1,000 sometimes. Like, I seen one with EMG pickups and you know, ebony fingerboard, mahogany body, maple neck, active pickups. I mean, for $650. Used. Okay, it was a couple years old, but the thing was in mint, and I think it even came with the case. I'm like, holy geez, like that's like a pro guitar. It might not be the American made pro guitar, but it's a pro level guitar, intermediate pro level guitar, for well under $1,000. No brainer, buy it, right? Buy 2. But let's get into, okay, so now we're at $400, which is 2 cheap guitars. Okay, let's say you start buying the intermediate guitars, you know, 400, we'll say beginner guitars are typically going to be from like 0 to like $300. Those are absolute beginner guitars usually, and we're talking new, of course. Used, maybe you get a good deal on a really good guitar for, you know, if you don't care what it is and it just suits your needs. You can sometimes find a lot of great Ibanez's and stuff like that for like $300-400. Used, and sometimes even like $250. Okay, it's got a couple of scratches on it, but you know, perfect intonation, and it plays like a dream. It's just got a little bit of road wear on it and everything works on it. Yeah, you buy it. You know what I mean? So you can get like a pro guitar for very cheap if you hold out, you know. But I'm going to aim this video more at the person looking for their second, third guitar type of thing. Now here's my thing. I've owned myself well over 40 guitars. I think I'm at 42 or 43, so I'm 48 now, so I got to buy at least another 5 guitars. My goal is to have a new guitar for every year of my life that I'm alive. But the problem is this: you don't want to have a whole bunch of cheap guitars. Number one, you're just not going to use them. Here's what happened when I got that TCM Explorer. It was a metal guitar. It wasn't the best sounding. I did end up putting like a Tom Anderson pickup. I bought a Duncan 59 pickup. it sounded a lot, not much better. I'm not a big fan of like modifying cheap guitars. I see a lot of guys doing it, but it's like the money you're going to put into that cheap guitar. Number one, you're just amplifying a shitty sounding guitar. You know, maybe it won't be shitty sounding, but it's you're putting money into something that really you're not going to get you're not going to get out of it what you think you're going to get out of it. Yeah, you're going to get a better sounding pickup, maybe a little more output, whatever, but you're not going to get a better tone. You know, like it's just going to amplify the tone that's already there. This is what typically cheaper guitars give you. They might give you great playability, like my Jackson Flying V, but it's got a basswood body, and basswood pretty much has the tonal qualities of a rock tree stump. So you can get a good sound out of it. There's no doubt about that. But you're not going to get. It's not going to make the guitar sound. It might be clearer, but it might not. It's not going to improve the tonal qualities of the guitar itself. Yes, tone woods are a thing. I know some people think it's a scam. If you can't hear the difference, don't worry about it. But once you start playing at stage volume, or what I call concert volume, stage volume, with guitars, you really find out what the guitar, like when the guitar is really overdriven, that's when you find out what its real tonal qualities are. Is it just going to be a mud monster, or is it going to be like, is this thing going to have like raunch and crunch and, you know, really sound good and have a sizzling sound at concert volume, right, or stage volume? That's when you find out whether you got a good guitar or not. And there's some guitars that are going to be better than others. Everything sounds good, you know, through completely processed effects and effects pedals sitting in your bedroom. But like I say, when you get the drummer in the mix and the bass player and the singer and the room and people talking and all that, you know, like that guitar, like the crowd will change the sound of your guitar. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing how it happens when you get out there and you're like, oh, okay, it sounds so good in the room. Then you get out there and it's just mud. You can't. It's almost unaudible on some of these cheaper guitars, right? And cheap, I don't necessarily mean price wise. Like I say, you know, there was a guitar I tried. It was at Spaceman Music, used to be known as Songbird Music. And it was a Schecter guitar, and it was like it had a shaler. This thing not only played awesome, but it sounded really. It was a really crisp. I don't know what the body was. I'm assuming it was mahogany, but it just sounded so good. I kind of regret not buying it. It was $250, and I was just like, this guitar is a player. Like this is a guitar. You didn't care about the looks of it that much, but like the neck on it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. And I'm just like, for $250, like this is a guitar that, okay, the electronics were getting a little bit crackly and stuff like that. It would be a guitar worth investing in because it would serve you very, very well. This is my Sg61 Reissue here. I would say this. If you buy a guitar that's in the medium range, we'll say like the $500 to say $800 range, you know, something that's you would call intermediate, where it's good but it still doesn't have all the like the Cadillac. I would never buy an $800 guitar that, you know, I would save up and buy the better version of it. You know what I mean? Like let's say we'll use Jackson Flying V's as a good example. You can get the JS32s like I got. Again, they're all going to have basswood bodies. They're going to pretty much, you know, they're going to sound okay, but they're never going to be stellar. They're never going to give you a stellar sound, no matter what. You can make them sound good. Doesn't matter how much effects you have on it. It's just never going to give you a better tone than what the guitar can produce. But it's something you can live with. Now, let's say you started out with, you know, you're past that beginner stage. You've been playing for a couple of years. You still got a cheap guitar. You know, in the $400 or $500 range, that kind of thing, that kind of quality. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're ready for an upgrade. You know, like, okay, you're now starting to gig, you're now starting to do stuff, and you're starting to find the limitations of that cheap guitar you got. So what did everybody do? They buy another $500 guitar, and basically they don't get any more out of that one than they got the one they already have, right? Because it just, you know, it's like, well, the expensive guitars are just too expensive. Well, you can finance now. I only mention that because it is an option, but like, for example, I don't think you can get guitars from Sweetwater up here in Canada, but like some of them you can do payments. Okay, now I'm not a big fan of this. This is only something you would do if you have no other option and you can't afford it. Same with the credit card thing. Don't buy equipment on credit cards unless you can pay for it. If you have to buy equipment with credit cards because you can't afford to pay and you can't afford to pay the credit card, don't do that, obviously. But that's how I got my good guitars. Well, not all of them, but my Gibsons. And for years, I've always wanted an SG. Being a big Angus Young fan as well. First big concert I ever saw was LA Guns opening, and AC/DC was the headliner, and I saw it for Blow Up Your Video. And I tell you, Angus Young's guitars, which are pretty much off-the-wall Gibsons, there's not really that much modifications to them. He does have like the tones and the volume sometimes bypass, just for more reliability. The guitar techs are, like he's hard on his guitars. There's no doubt about that. But he's been playing the same guitars forever. Like he's got 60s guitars, he's got 70s guitars, and he only takes 2 or 3 of them on the road. That's it, and they're wired up just specifically for reliability and to play live, right? So when I heard like his guitar, it sounds stellar at any volume, and trust me, volume. When you hear an SG at full volume like that, number one, the paint comes off the wall. I remember when they played For Those About to Rock, and those big battleship cannons coming out over the stage, and when they went off, you saw, like, you just felt the boom. You couldn't even hear it was so loud in there in the Ottawa Civic Center. Paint was falling off the ceilings and dust and shit, and it was just like you felt the heat blast. Like everybody in the front row must have lost their eyebrows. It was such a good concert, but the guitar sound was so good. So it's like, okay, that's straight through the amp, really, and just lots of amplifiers. It's just a whole bunch of, it's an SG plugged into like 20 or 30 Marshall amps and then a PA system. That's what Angus uses. Like he doesn't use he's got some other little things on there just to make the job easier, but it's really, there's no effects or nothing. So when I heard that, like, I'm like, that's a good sounding guitar. You know what I mean? Like, those are good sounding guitars, and those are achievable guitars to get. Like, you can buy, like, yeah, sure, he has his signature pickups and stuff like that, but that doesn't really matter. It's a good sounding guitar. So that's why is he? This guy's got millions and millions of dollars. Why is he still playing guitars from the 1960s? Because he likes them. You know what I mean? He likes these guitars because they suit his needs. You know what I mean? Eric Johnson, he plays that the Stratocasters. His Stratocasters are not replica Stratocasters of the year he's playing. They are 1958 Stratocasters or whatever, 1970s or whatever he's using, 60s and 70s Stratocaster guitars. He has those guitars, and he doesn't get. I think his newest piece of equipment. I saw his rig rundown, and Eric Johnson. I think the newest thing he might have is a Mesa Boogie cab or something like that from like the 90s. That's like the newest stuff he uses. He achieves the sound he achieves with old equipment that he probably bought new at one point, but it's just like it served him so well he didn't need to buy anything else. He found his sound, right? So think about the money that these people have, okay? And they're not buying brand new. Why not? I mean, you got to think about how much the technology has changed. I mean, like I say, it's almost hard to buy a bad guitar nowadays. Even the crappy stuff is really good. Like back in the 90s, you really didn't get a good guitar until it was about $800. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there were some, but most of them weren't that great. In the 90s, then, oh wow, quality control started really coming up, and you could find a good guitar for like $300 or $400. But before that, like, I mean, like I think of all those Samics and stuff like that, they were almost unplayable. Sharp frets on the side, and it's like the unbalanced pickups and just whatever. So do you want like 3 or 4 of those? Like you buy 4 of those, there's your first $1,200 guitar, right? Which usually, once you get over that $1,000 mark, I'd say $800 to $1,200. Even still today, you can find a professional guitar, amazing guitar, between $800 and $1,200, even new. You just got to know what you're looking for, right? So I get those 2 guitars, whatever, and then I saved up for the 3rd guitar, which was that White Ibanez, that RG750. Now, I had a choice between an Sg61 reissue. This is back in the 1980s when they had the 62 reissue out. The 61 reissue wasn't out yet. That didn't come along till I believe 94 is the first time I saw them. And I believe that it was 93, 94 when they first came out as a reissue. And the 62 reissue, I wanted it because that's what Angus Young used in SG, and I just loved the look of the 62 reissue with the smaller pick guard and all that. And I played them, and they were good. A friend of mine had one, and it played great. You know what I mean? And I was kind of sold on buying that guitar. And at 15 years old, I was like, okay, I'd saved up all my money for like 2 summers or whatever it was, and I had enough money to buy a really good, expensive guitar. And my thought at the time was, I'll be married by probably 25, which didn't happen, but anyway, another story for another time. And that I would end up with, basically, I'd only ever be able to buy one professional guitar in my life. So I had to make it a good one, right? It had to do everything. Well, I walked in the store. It was Steve's Music in Ottawa, and the guy there, Kevin, I don't know if he's still be there now. He might be retired by now. He must be getting up there. Anyway, I walk in and I'm set on buying this Sg62 reissue for $1,100 plus tax. And I tried this guitar probably about 15 or 20 times, and plus every other guitar in the store. But I was really set on, the image of the SG, because I love the image of it, and I know what they sound like. I've heard them at, Angus Young concert volume. I know that's the guitar for me, right? It'll suit my needs. If it's good enough for him, it'll definitely be good enough for me. But then there was all these whiz-bang guitar players like Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. And Steve Vai wasn't quite big yet. Like, he was getting big, but he wasn't quite the stat. Passion Warfare was just around the corner type of thing. And Joe Satriani was just kind of same thing. Just starting to, Surfing with the Alien was just out, and all that. And I was starting to hear that stuff. And I'm like, that stuff is just mind-blowingly cool. Right? Nobody, like Joe Satriani, the first time you hear him, he blows your mind, because like nobody ever sounded like that before him. You know what I mean? Like he really took the guitar into the space age, right? And I knew the SG couldn't do that. Really, like it could sort of do that, but not quite, right? This is my 61 reissue here. So anyway, Kevin's like, he goes, that's a great guitar there. He goes, we're not allowed to tell you guys what to buy. He was just a store clerk. He goes, but he goes, hear me out on this one. He goes, that guitar is great, but he goes, try some of these guitars right here. Just, he goes, these things, they got 5-way pickup switching. He goes, what kind of music do you like? And I told him, Randy Rhoads and Slash and Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and all Eddie Van Halen. He goes, look, that doesn't even have a whammy bar on it. You know what I mean? He goes, this has a locking whammy bar. So edge tremolo, Floyd Roses. And he was pointing all that. He goes, but these guitars, look at the necks on them. They're really razor thin. I mean, he totally sold me on it in a sense, but he knew I was a kid. I didn't have a lot of money, or he knew I was going to spend my hard money on a pro guitar, right? And I tried these RG750s, and I also tried, it was an RG1150. It was the Alex Skolnick model, the guitar player from, if I said his name right, from Testament. And I remember this thing had like crazy, it was a crazy looking guitar, number one, and it was like, it had a crazy good sound to it. Like, it was a really heavy, dark, whatever did the Mazio pickups that were in there. They had quite the output. It was a great sounding guitar, but I know it was a little more expensive, but I ended up going towards the RG750, and I tried it with the headphones on. As soon as I tried those guitars with the headphones on, it was like, okay, I tried the SG62 reissue, and then I plugged in these Ibanez's, and it took me to another planet. Like, this thing was space age. That was a pro guitar. That was the guitar I was going to get, and I got it. And it served me well. Now, I'd probably still be playing that Ibanez still to this day if it would still be in working condition, because it was such a good guitar. Now, I didn't have it long because it got stolen on me in about, was it 93, 90, it must have been 1993 when it got stolen. Now, I bought the Ibanez probably in 91 or 90, somewhere around that, right around when I was still in school, so it had to be before 91. So I was still in high school, so I only had the guitar, that Ibanez IG750 for maybe 3 or 4 years, and it was everything. Now, when I got that guitar, guess what happened to all my other guitars? Well, I barely touched the Explorer, the TCM Explorer, but I did put a good pickup on it, because my goal with that one was, okay, well, if I break a string, one thing I learned about floating bridges, when you break a string, the guitar goes way out of tune on you. I had it as a backup guitar, that's it. I played gigs. I wouldn't even, I played my first gigs with the TCM Explorer and had the that other, the that Harmony Rocket, that red Harmony Rocket as the backup. So I played my first gig with the TCM Explorer, and I played, I think, 1 or 2 gigs with it. That was it. I mean, I was still like, 14, 15, or 13, 14, whatever I was at the time. So played on the back of a flatbed truck, and then I played on a stage and whatever. The following year I had the Ibanez. And the Ibanez, okay, well, there was no point in bringing the that other hollow body guitar to the gig because it just wouldn't hold up at those volumes. By this time I also had a Mesa Boogie half cab, so I was starting to build some really good gear, and I still have that Mesa Boogie cab to this day. In fact, if I've ever, my dream was to have 3 Mesa Boogie Mark 4 or Mark 3 Mark 5 stacks with the big grills on it. Those cabs, I wish I only have 1. I need to get 5 more. 3 bottoms and 2 more tops. And yeah, like, I don't want newer equipment. I want that, because those things are freaking still, even to this day, are awesome. So anyway, I started playing in bands and stuff like that. And everywhere I went, like, that Ibanez was the guitar. Like, it was a pro guitar, and all the other guitar players would be saying the same thing. Oh, it's too expensive, whatever. But then they'd have like 5 cheap guitars. I'm like, well, that one guitar was $250, that guitar was $450, and that guitar was $600. You could have bought one of these. And yeah, it's cool that you have those 3 guitars, but those 3 guitars could have been one of these. And this guitar, once you start playing a guitar like this, you won't want to play those other guitars as much. Unless it's a guitar that does something completely different, but you're always going to play your better guitar. Sometimes you'll pick up the other ones just for nostalgia, but you always really play unless it does, like I say, like my Flying V's don't play like my, this was a cool guitar. I do kind of regret getting rid of it. I bought that one new too, and that's a pro guitar. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, it's an Epiphone, but Epiphone do make good guitars, and that one, it sounds great. It's just it weighs 17 pounds. Like, I kid you not, it's 14 or 17 pounds, whatever it is. It's heavier than what they say it is. I know I put it on a scale and it was heavier. I think it was 17 pounds. So, like, every strap I put on that would just stretch and stretch and stretch. Like, the straps wouldn't stop stretching. It's so heavy. But it was really cool playing on stage. It was probably the one that got... I never seen so many camera flashes in my life. Get on stage with a double neck guitar, trust me, you're going to see... You better wear sunglasses. Like, everybody's like, it's just because it's so bizarre and cool. And they sound great. But anyway, yeah, so the Ibanez served me very well. I started playing shows, playing gigs, and then, of course, it got stolen on me, and I was devastated. I mean, that was a good guitar, and of course, when I went back to the music store, by that time I'd magically had enough saved away for another guitar, or just had enough saved away, and it was like, I could put this towards a college fund or get another guitar. Obviously, I made the right choice and I got another guitar, right? And anyway, and the guitar I would pick up, which is probably coming up pretty soon, it will be the Green Hammer Diablo. I wasn't going to go out and just buy another cheap guitar. There was no reason to do this. This guitar you're looking at here was, I think it was about $400. And you're going to see somewhere, if we haven't passed a picture yet, but you're going to see a whole bunch of this guitar and a whole bunch, the double neck. The double neck was $900 plus tax. This was $500 plus tax. But Gibsons are too expensive. Okay, what am I? I'm at $1,400. Okay, remember the SG3 was $1,560. Okay, remember the Gibsons are too expensive. The top of the line, maybe not top of the line, but the Gibsons and the Fenders are too expensive, right? So there's a $400 guitar, okay, and then the double neck was, like I say, $900, and then there's going to be another guitar at the time. I did pick up a Les Paul for Epiphone Les Paul in '92 when I went to Los Angeles. And that was $350, but that was a really good guitar. That guitar became one of my main backup guitars live. In fact, when my Hammer Diablo would pop a string, that Epiphone would finish off a lot of gigs for me at like second set, third set with just this Epiphone. It didn't sound as good at volume as the Hammer, but the Hammer, we're going to talk about that guitar very specifically when we get to it. But that was the replacement guitar, was the Hammer Diablo, And then by the time in '92 when I got back, I can't remember if I guess, yeah, I guess I still had the Ibanez. That's right, I still had the Ibanez. Uh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, I still had the Ibanez when I bought the the Epiphone '92 Les Paul. It was a Les Paul stand. You'll see pictures of it fairly soon. That guitar sounded really good. It had cheaper pickups in it. I did put a Duncan 59 in the bridge, and that really livened up that guitar because the guitar itself sounded great. The problem with that guitar was it was a 13-pound guitar. So after 3 hours of playing, yeah, your shoulder was about to fall off, right? But it sounded good. With the original pickups in it, they were a little bit microphonic at volume, but it was a good sounding guitar. In fact, a lot of the times I would, some of the bands I was in, the rhythm guitar player would be like, "Hey, Reg, can I play your Les Paul tonight? You know, like if you break a string, I'll give it right back to you." It's just I'll use my guitar as a backup, and we could share that one as the backup, and I'll use it, and because it sounded good. You know what I mean? So for $350, that guitar was a player. It was good. This guitar here, great recording guitar, phenomenal recording guitar, absolutely undistinguishably horrible as a live guitar. The pickups were Al Nickel 5s, which very low output, like extremely low output on these guitars. You couldn't hear the dynamics with your ears, but when you recorded it, the tone was so sweet. That's when I understood what that guitar was about. And I was going to use it like an acoustic electric. It just didn't work out. Because I was thinking of my Harmony Rocket. My Harmony Rocket would kick this thing's ass on the stage, just because pickups had better clarity, more output. Where these things had great clarity, but they were just such low output pickups that they were really meant. This guitar is really meant for recording. A great sounding guitar, but like at stage volume, it just didn't have any drive whatsoever. It was a really bizarre guitar. Um, but other than that, it was pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So there's a double neck. Okay, that's a cool shot I got of it. The next picture coming up will tell you why you don't waste your money on the cheaper guitars, even though they're very, very cool guitars. Because there's a guitar that I after a while, like you gotta understand, like playing 200 and almost 300 shows, uh, my Les Paul was getting worn out, right? So I bought this G400 for that plus a little practice amp was $400. Again, 500 for the Ibanez Art Core and 900. So right there's an Sg61 Reissue at $1,900. Those three guitars could have covered that. Now, mind you, these are cool guitars, and again, I did record with this. I don't have any recordings left of it. I kind of regret it, getting rid of it, but I stopped playing it just because it wasn't doing what I wanted. It wasn't the jazz box I thought it was going to be. But this next guitar coming up, this guitar was bang for the buck, probably one of the best. I would highly recommend this as a starter guitar. This is Epiphone G400. They were like $250 at the time. Now at concert volume, they were kind of muddy sounding, as you would imagine, but they were a good playing guitar. They intonate very well, and they were reliable. And this was a great jam night guitar because it was so light, you know. Not so much a great jam night guitar, but great for the audience enjoyed it. Okay, so the next three guitars coming up, okay, is the Les Paul, the Epiphone G400, and my Hammer Diablo. Now, I sold my Les Paul and my Hammer Diablo before I got the double neck. So not all the pictures are in sequence, as you imagine. Right there, that green Hammer Diablo. We're going to talk about that one fairly soon here. But there, two great guitars for like $500 of guitars with the Epiphones, the two Epiphones. That Les Paul was really good, though. It was exactly like playing a Gibson Les Paul standard, except for the neck was a little bit knobbier and the hardware not quite as good. It held the tuning the same, the sustain on the bridge was the same, it was mahogany body, but it was heavier. And I always said the Epiphones were heavier. Now I know why, because Gibson actually does like 9-hole, like underneath the top, there's like 9 holes drilled out to lighten down the body. Now, obviously the pickups in the Gibsons were far better, but when you put good pickups in these Epiphones, they actually will surprise you how good they sound. The fretwork is not as nice, but they're binded necks, so they played well. That G400 was an awesome guitar for what it was for the money. But as a starter guitar and a jam night guitar, yeah, those were fine. Gigging guitar, obviously that Les Paul held up really, really well. That thing, I mean, you could beat somebody to death when it would still stay in tune. It was a really good guitar. what got it was basically, the vol. I mean, I had that guitar for 13 years. I had to replace the switches from time to time, whatever. So, okay. Anyway, let's go back to my Ibanez. My Ibanez gets stolen. Gets stolen. I go into the store to replace it, looking for another Ibanez. I see this thing on the wall, and the first thing I was like, no, it doesn't even have binding on the neck, and I'm more of a fan of binding on the neck than not. But I figure, one thing I'd learned, there was a Kramer Night Swan in there. I tried it. There was a, the BC Rich Gunslingers, all these guitars, and I tried them all these iconic guitar, like 90s Shredmaster guitars. I tried them all, and the ones that I always found were the best were really the Ibanez's. They were just, with the binding on the neck, they just tended to just work better, and the edge tremolos I think are far superior to the Floyd's for a few reasons, but we'll get into that in another topic. So I see this thing, it looks cool, but I'm like, is it gonna do what I need it to do? So I grab it, I plug it in, or I play it. I'm like, okay, well, the frets aren't sharp on it anywhere on the side. Like, the fretwork was really good on this thing. Okay, and then, so I'm like, acoustically, I always try an electric guitar acoustically first. The people that always say there's no, tone woods don't make a difference. I love this shot. Look at how aggressive that whammy bar is. That is a Floyd. I don't remember which Floyd it was. It's probably a Floyd 1000 or whatever. But that Floyd was really good on that. Like, it was not good. It was great. Out of all the Floyds I've ever played, that one was really great. But look at the name of the guitar, right? Hammer guitars are really good. I don't think they make a bad one. So anyway, it was 2-octave neck at 24 frets, which was good. Rosewood fingerboards, so okay, very mid-range sound out front, good for guitar solos. And it had an alder body, which actually this guitar sounded so good. And it wasn't just me thinking that it sounded good. I don't ever remember playing a place where people didn't remark how amazing that guitar sounded. It has Seymour Duncan pickups in it. What are they? Were they Jazz Pros? Were they Trembacher 4s or 2s or 6s? Or was it a Screaming Demon and a Trembacher? Or was it I don't know, because Hammer offered these guitars with a few different combinations of pickups. So I don't think any two of them were quite alike. The emerald green, look at the grains on that. That's an alder body. Now, alder is nice and light like basswood, but it has a very nice smooth sound. Very like smooth on the highs, lows, not super low and heavy sounding like you'd get with mahogany, and really, really popped, pronounced mid-range. But it had more of a like a well-rounded sound, which when you put effects to this guitar, it was so clear. The pickups were great to begin with. The Duncan pickups in that were great to begin with, and I found this thing sounded so good. It actually sounded way better than my Ibanez did. And I mean, I thought my Ibanez was like the king of the pile. King of the castle. When I got it, I knew there were better guitars out there, but not in the price range. It was like the Hammer just blew me away. I was, even my buddies were there. It was like, we were trying it in the store, and he's like I plugged in about 5 other guitars, like the Night Swan did. And the Night Swan, what really got me away from it was, although I enjoyed it, was no binding on the side of the neck, and I loved the look of it with the reverse headstock and all that, and that middle pickup. Rather, I wanted a neck pickup because like this was going to be my main guitar, and like a second guitar, yeah, the Night Swan would have been the Kramer Night Swan would have been a good guitar for that, but it didn't sound, those 90s Kramer Night Swans did not sound as good as those Hammer Diablos did. Those things just sounded phenomenal. It didn't matter what you plugged it into, it was incredibly good sounding. For a floating bridge, this guitar actually really resonated. Like whatever Hammer did, and of course they stopped making them and they were so good. Hammer basically, whatever they did to this guitar, it was like it had a lot of sustain. And usually floating bridges, Floyds and stuff like that, they don't have great sustain. Like that those floating bridges rob you of sustain. Maybe it was just the chrome on the chrome plating. I don't know what it was, but that guitar had Les Paul like sustain, uh, and projection. Like when you played the guitar unplugged, the guitar was loud. Like it's like my SGs. Like you'll play a basswood body guitar, and it's like, okay, oh, this sounds okay. It'll sound okay, but you play that same guitar with a mahogany body, you're going to notice just the clarity, the volume difference. Like I say, even like these Epiphones, they, $350 guitar. I mean, this thing sounded really killer through a 15,000 watt PA. I was using the Randall 100 head. That's the remains of my first 50 watt trainer amp, and then of course I run it with the Masabuki. So anyway, I get this green Hammer Diablo, okay, and I love that guitar until I wore it out. Like again, probably about 275 shows, playing 4 nights a week for a couple of years straight. Sorry, a bit of noise from the computer there. And I got to tell you, like it held up fairly well, but then it started to do something weird. And I mean, the neck on the Hammer was like a not quite a satin finish, but like a satin finish. This is the Harmony Rocky, my first guitar. It was a really smooth neck on it. It just didn't bind at all. Yes, it was a bolt-on neck, but this neck was really, really good. It was really flat, wide, and fast. You know what I mean? It was like if you couldn't play well on that Hammer Diablo, it's because you couldn't play. But again, running this thing, like I remember Soundman after Soundman would just say killer sounding guitar. Now, mind you, I did run it with a lot of effects, and this thing at stage volume handled effects amazingly. Even better than my Ibanez, and it had three-way switch in it for a little while. Then I put I forget what the switch was, but anyway, you could take your three-way switch and turn it into a five-way switch. That was the only thing I didn't like about the Hammer at the time, is I wanted that five-way switching versatility. In hindsight, it's like, okay, well, you don't have to have a guitar that's quite that versatile. When it does, sometimes less is more, right? I eventually went back to the three-way switch on it, and that was good enough. But that guitar, like I say, I was playing, and we'd play, summer, winter, we'd play, and we're talking Canadian winters here, so here's what happened. I bought that guitar, and it kept me from buying other guitars. The only thing I wanted was to buy a second version of that. Like I wanted the blue one. I love the green one because everybody loved the color of this thing. This thing, when the spotlights hit it, it was quite a charming guitar. And I remember I was playing somewhere one night, and all of a sudden I was starting to get some fret buzz, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on with this?" I figured, well, maybe it's just coming in from -30 into the hot bar, whatever. I figured that's what it was, and then after a couple of weeks, it wasn't just my guitar, but the other guitar player, his guitar was kind of acting up too. We couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. It's like, I had to do basically an intonation job on my guitar, like just before the show, and again, that's what happens when you play live all the time, right? And we couldn't figure it out. So what was happening was we play a gig, and rather than everybody drive all the way back to the jam house, the lead singer, we'd put our guitars in the back of his car, and he would basically, yeah, I'll drop them off. But what we didn't know, and I guess he just didn't know any better. Anyway, we went to his house one day, and me and the other guitar players, oh, do you want to grab the guitars out of the trunk? He goes, no, I just leave them in the trunk. So basically, he's driving around with our guitars in the back of his truck, or in the back of his trunk of his car all winter, pretty much, with like in -40, whatever, leaving them in there. And we pull these guitars, because I remember a few times we pulled these guitars, like, holy Jesus, man, the back of your car must be cold. These guitars are frozen. They're almost like icicles. Bring them in. No wonder these guitars, I ended up, the neck started to warp on that poor Hammer. Like, I mean, and again, of course, went to replace it. There was nothing I could do at that point. The guitar was terminal. It still played and sounded amazing, but I had to put the action up enough that I couldn't intonate it the way I wanted. So I ended up selling it for $250. Now you can find these things on Reverb for like $4,000, but they're like mint condition, whatever. I've been seeing them used here or there for like $450, $500. If you get a chance, depending on what kind of shape it's in. If it's a little banged up and it's still a player, get it, because you will not like. That guitar was so smooth. It played. It was a. It played. Even the Ibanez, although my Ibanez RG750 was a really awesome guitar, that that guitar, that hammer guitar, played like a fixed bridge. It was just so good. Like that's why I keep raving about it. So I do miss that guitar more than any. Now that said, it was cheaper than what my Ibanez was. Would I have bought it the first time around? Probably not. Not because probably because the Ibanez had the five-way switching. That sold me. But I remember one of the things. Same guy again, Kevin. Again, anybody that went to Steve's Music, they know who Kevin is. He was a pretty popular guy. He was their guitar tech. And I said, geez, I'd love to take this guitar, but he goes, it only has three-way switching, and my Ibanez had five. He goes, well, he goes, Reg, he says, I got one of these switches. It turns your three-way into a five-way. Pop one of those in there, it's an extra $50. I'm like, let's do it. You know what I mean? I ended up wiring it up myself, and trust me, this thing was a nightmare to wire up. It was quite the switch. But I got it done. I got it done, and it really was a very versatile guitar. Now the downside is, in the 90s, this is before like social media and all that stuff. Like the computers were a thing, the internet was even a thing, but like, I mean, it's nothing like it was like it is today. People didn't spend all day on the computer. Like you went into a chat room, you riled some people up and trolled them, and then you went away. You know what I mean? Like you went and did something with your friends outside, or we went to the bars or whatever, and we do stuff like that. So very few photos exist of me playing this guitar on stage. There are some, and I haven't added them into my folder yet. I'm going to have to at some point. You get a laugh at my hairdo, and looking cross between Jesus Christ and Charles Manson. I was a pretty cool looking guitar player, back in the day with the hair and everything like that. But I never did the glam thing. I was always more like like the Skid Row kind of, AC/DC Skid Row, except for the schoolboy uniform from AC/DC, but more like just kind of like jeans and t-shirt kind of rocker, right? I was never I had the leather jackets, sometimes I'd wear the, spiked Iron Maiden, Judas Priest kind of armbands and stuff like that, but most of the time I wouldn't wear stuff like that because I didn't want to scratch my guitars. I never wore a belt when I'd play my guitars because I didn't want to scratch the backs, or if I did, I'd put the buckle off to the side, so you didn't ruin them, right? But anyway, yeah, so the Hammer Diablo was like not my last professional guitar, but then I started, after I sold the Diablo and the Epiphone Les Paul, I mean, those guitars, man, those were good road guitars. They really were. What did it in was, never leave somebody else in charge of your guitars. Take them home. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, but take them home. But, no guitar will stand up to that kind of punishment over periods of time. Things are frets are gonna fall off. I've seen even Fender Stratocasters have frets fall off them, just from the hot, the cold, the hot, the cold. Like even in the summertime, you're under spotlights. So it's like you're cooking that guitar, and then then you take it. Like the guitar will detune on you just from taking it from one room off the stage into it, taking it just off the stage, where it's cooler down on the dance floor, and like your guitar will start to detune. I've had that happen. It's bizarre when it happens, but it does happen. But no, the double neck, I got it. It was a professional guitar. It wasn't a practical guitar. As much as I loved it, and I sold it because like I say, I had the day I took that picture, I think it was, where that's sitting on the couch with the three other guitars. I'm like, there's my Gibson Sg61 Reissue. And I did a video on the Sg61 Reissue. And again, when I first got introduced to them in 1994, I was in Lausanne Music in Ottawa. It's like the Gibson, not the Gibson distributor, but one of the main Gibson, sellers there. And I remember it was like, okay, I was trying a 62 reissue and a Les Paul Studio, these new Les Paul Studios that just came out. There was a cool blue one, and there was a green one and a red one, and they were basically like the a dressed down version of the Les Paul, where it was, instead of having it really dressed up and fancy, this was just kind of like a no frills, plug it in, go and do some recording. But they also became really good live instruments too. So I tried that, and then I saw the 61 reissue, and I noticed it looked a little bit different than the 62. I was instantly in love with this. It had the bigger headstock, and then I picked it up in this neck, this flat, fast neck. It wasn't like my Ibanez Wizard, but it was a little bit thicker, but it was a little bit narrower, and it was just like, it was the perfect neck. It was just like, oh, like you hear angels singing or whatever. And I plugged this thing in, and it had classic 57s in it, and the first thing I noticed was how crunchy and crispy and clear they were, and dynamic, and like just punch you in the face kind of sound. And I'm just like, this thing is awesome. And at the time, it was $1,200. Now, that guitar, had it been in front of me, in front of the Ibanez or the Hammer Diablo, I don't know which guitar I would have walked out of the store with if those three guitars were on the shelf at the same time, side by side. Because that became the guitar that I set all measurement of every guitar. Is there better guitars out there than the Sg61 Reissue? Yes. But is it a great guitar? It's not great. It's phenomenal in its category. If you like vintage classic sounds, you can get modern sound out of it, but you can't get fully modern sound out of it. My Hammer Diablo was an extremely modern sounding guitar. The Ibanez, obviously, Ibanezes are typically really like, you can't get a classic sound out of an Ibanez. They're too space age sounding. They can get the Super Mario Brothers sound, as I call it. They're just like, the frets are so thick on the Ibanezes. The Hammers were crisp and clear and very modern sounding. The Ibanez is space age sounding. But if you wanted classic rock, classic metal, even blues, even country western, the SG does it all. You know what I mean? Where the other guitars, they could do it, but it's just they sounded too modern. So that said, like, if you buy a really good guitar, you won't be playing all these other cheaper guitars. They're going to get mothballed, and that's why, like, I got rid of this. I just wasn't playing it enough. And it was kind of a bit of a waste of money, but it was fun to have it while I had it. But at the end of the day, it's just like, when you get really good guitars, it stops you from buying all those cheaper guitars, because you buy something that you're happy with, and that's really the core of it. It suits the need, and you're happy with it. And not only are you happy with playing it, but you can really just focus on playing, rather than, well, if I just get this next piece of gear, that'll make me that much better. You got to work with what you got, sure, and stuff like that. And like I say, I'd love to have this guitar back again for just recording purposes, but like, that ship has kind of sailed, and I'm glad I got rid of it and financed my SG3 with it. And between selling that and selling my double neck, and basically the double neck, which I do, like, again, it was a great guitar. It was 17 pounds, it just wasn't practical. Carrying the case on, it was like you were carrying around a refrigerator everywhere you went. But like, the thing was the size of a dresser, and it sounded great. Like, it sounded really good at any volume. It wasn't a muddy guitar at all. It had good pickups in it, and it was a great guitar, but it just wasn't practical. So I changed my kind of status, and I'll wrap up here, is that once you get past that intermediate stage, or like, you're going to be playing guitar for the rest of your life kind of thing, it's probably better to take your time and invest in a really good guitar that'll last you a long time. Go try everything on the wall, because some guitars will just surprise you. And when you buy a really good, like the Hammer Diablo totally took me by surprise, and I wish Hammer would make those guitars again. I don't know how they would even really approve upon them. Like, they were just so good for what they were. And they are still quite sought after, and you find the odd one for sale, but the thing is to find one in good condition. Good luck, But I would say this: once you get that good guitar, okay, and you get rid of all your cheaper guitars, okay, you won't want to buy a cheaper guitar again once you've set the standard. At that point, you're not asking, how do I buy another guitar? At that point, what guitar are you going to buy? For example, I've got my SGs, okay? I don't need another SG, but I would, and I would like to have a really modern sounding guitar. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but like a whiz-bang guitar, maybe another Ibanez, maybe, who knows, maybe a Kramer Night Swan, or whatever's out there that sounds really cool. Some of these Paul Reed Smiths with the Floyd Roses look really, really cool. You got to try them to see if you like them. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at about that. I figured this was a good discussion to have, a little bit long, but anyway, if you like this kind of content, all links are down below to help support the channel, and thank you so much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others, always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day, and rock on.